All right, Kiss Army, welcome to the KissFAQ podcast. Thank you for letting us into your head. I hope we don't do any damage. This is a Kiss-related podcast by the board, for the board. We hope you enjoy.
Welcome to episode 28 of the KissFAQ podcast. I'm your host this week, Lonnie, stlkiss on the FAQ message board. And today I'm joined by Ken, 69th Blizzard, and Daniel, wezze, joining us for the first time in a while. Guys, how are you today?
Doing good.
Good.
Yeah, fine.
Well, as you can see, and as you could hear by the introduction, Julian is not on the show this week. So don't read too much into it. Julian has given us a little bit of a latitude to do the show without him. So let's see if we can do a decent show and he doesn't have to do too much editing after he sees what we discussed. Just a couple quick announcements before we get going. First, I want to thank everyone who listened last week to the Kiss Urban Legends episode and left us feedback on the YouTube page and on the FAQ message board. Second, if you haven't checked out the new KissFAQ podcast Facebook page, go over to Facebook, just type in KissFAQ podcast, it'll come right up. Leave us some thoughts over there. And finally, I want to remind everyone that there are several different ways that you can listen to the show. First being YouTube. You can subscribe to the show on iTunes. You can listen on the Spreaker app. And the show is also available to download at kissfaq.com/podcast. So just a few different options for you to listen to the show that make it convenient for you. All right. So today, we're doing another anniversary show. 2015 has a lot of anniversaries on it. Obviously, it's the 40th anniversary of Kiss Alive and Dress to Kill. But there's an anniversary that's not getting a lot of attention that we're going to talk about today. And that is, it is the 25th anniversary of the Hot in the Shade tour. So, 1990, Kiss stepped up to the plate and delivered one of their best tours in their history, in my opinion. It kind of went back to showing other bands how the big boys do it, with a great stage show and just touring and living up to the name Kiss. So, Hot in the Shade comes out in the fall of '89, and after struggling to get a tour going, the success of Forever helped get the tour off the ground. And the tour kicked off on May 4th in Lubbock, Texas. The band played 123 shows on that tour, all in North America, which really shows Kiss going back to their grassroots of going to smaller venues and playing smaller towns, because obviously there's not 123 major markets to play in North America. I mean, you look at some of the dates that they played, some of the places, like Cape Girardeau, Missouri, Fargo, North Dakota, Johnson City, Tennessee, Peoria, Illinois, Terre Haute, Indiana. The band really went back to the grassroots campaign and going back to what they've said for a long time of just because you live in a small town doesn't mean you don't deserve to have a big show come to your town. So let's jump into the set list first and foremost. To me, that's always the most important thing when I go see a show is what songs did they play. So set list saw the band go back to playing a lot of the classic stuff that they hadn't played in a long time, like I Stole Your Love and I Was Made for Loving You, God of Thunder, I Want You. I'm not just going to read through the set list. Guys, what are your thoughts on the set list? So it's not just me talking. Daniel, what do you think about the set list?
I was kind of surprised when I checked the set list, because in my mind they changed it up a lot. But when comparing to the Crazy Nights tour, they didn't really change it that much. If you look at what classic songs they didn't play, that they played on the Crazy Nights tour, you missed out on War Machine. That's a big mistake, I think. I would have loved to see War Machine during the Hot in the Shade tour. I guess it's kind of hard to have both War Machine and God of Thunder, because it's like it's the Gene Simmons badass song. So yeah,
let's reset, Daniel. We're going to go to you to give your thoughts on the set list for the tour.
A big difference from the set list from the previous tour was that the new material, like Rise to It, Hide Your Heart, and Forever, worked well, and Forever was a big hit. And when you compare to Crazy Nights, No, 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 and Bang Bang New are probably two of the worst songs in the catalog, according to me. So that's a big difference. Otherwise, if you look at the set list, you'll be surprised that it's pretty close to the Crazy Night set list. There aren't a big... Actually, I miss a song from the Crazy Night set list, and that's War Machine. But I guess God of Thunder and War Machine, they compete for the same spot. So that's my take on the set list.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, you always hear about how they went back to their roots on the Hot in the Shade set list and started playing the classic songs again. But I did the same thing. I was looking at set list before we started recording, doing a little show prep actually, and there is a lot of the classic tunes that were played on those previous on the Crazy Nights tour as well. I was surprised at how many were played on the Crazy Nights tour that were also on the Hot in the Shade tour. I mean, granted, there were several additions, but it wasn't as dramatic as I had always thought it was. Ken, what do you think about the set list for the Crazy Nights tour?
I love the set list.
Sorry.
Right. I love the set list. First of all, I saw them on this tour in September of 1990 in Concord, California. And what a difference, because I saw them on Crazy Nights, the prior tour, and besides the set list being heavy with Crazy Nights songs that some of them I didn't care for so much, the show itself was, I guess we'll get into that, was totally different and better, so much better. But the set list, I mean, leading off, they led off with, I Stole Your Love, and that kind of harkened back for me to Alive 2, which was my first Kiss album I bought back in '77. So I was just stoked from that alone. Of like, oh my God, I can't believe they pulled it out, So and then they're gonna have their classics, of course, like Deuce and Black Diamond and so on. But they only had one Crazy Nights song on there, Crazy Nights, which is fine. That was fine because that was kind of recent and it was the main single off of Crazy Nights. Shout Out Loud, I think they were bringing that back. Things like that. Strutter, another classic, bringing that. The songs for Hot in the Shade, like Rise to It and Forever, that was fine. Those are great songs that they included there. I could have, they could have moved Fits Like a Glove. I mean, I'm okay with that song, but it's not one of their better songs, so I don't know why they always included it.
Well, you just have to look at the Detroit show the first night when Gene Simmons playing Fits Like a Glove and he's doing the scream, like a hot knife through. Yeah,
I love that. The scream is the best part of that song.
It really is. Song in the '80s.
It really is. But yeah, the set list's great. I mean, Love Gun, Detroit Rock City, Cold Gin. They really hit the first album on this tour heavy. So I'm trying to think what else. It was a good mix. It was just a good mix of classic and some of the 80s stuff too. It was a very well picked set list. I enjoyed it.
Yeah, it really, they did play quite a few of the classic songs. Looking at the set list, it's 13 songs from the classic era that I call the classic era, 73 to 79, that they chose for. I mean, I Stole Your Love, they hadn't played that live since 1978, so it was really resurrecting that song. And Ken, I can see your point of view, you see that show, and 1990 is at a time too where there isn't the internet. You're not on the internet every day to see what songs they played the night before. They probably came out with I Stole Your Love, and it probably blew your mind that they're even starting with that at the time. So, I mean, I Saw Your Love, Deuce, Black Diamond, Shout It Out Loud, Strutter, Calling Dr. Love, I Was Made for Loving You, God of Thunder, Cold Gin, Love Gun, Detroit Rock City, I Want You, Rock and Roll Night, all those classic tunes that they played on that tour. And I think, and we've said it before on the show, but I think a lot of that goes back to they saw the success that Smashes, Thrashers, and Hits had, and they saw that, you know, people still like these old classic Kiss songs that we've basically been ignoring since '83 when we took off the makeup and, you know, trying to just play new material.
I guess also the Paul Stanley solo tour played into it. He played a few of those, and they were great received.
Yeah, that's an excellent point. I mean, he played "I Want You" and some things like that and "I Stole Your Love" on the Paul Stanley solo tour and stuff that, and he sees the reaction firsthand from the crowd, like, oh, people are into these songs.
And when's the last time they played 22 songs in the set list too? I mean, come on.
Yeah, if you compare.
Go ahead.
If you compare with the Crazy Nights, one of the big differences was that the length of the show. You know, Crazy Nights seldom went over 90 minutes, but this time around they always closed in. They were close to 2 hours at least with the shows, and that's a big difference. And other than that, I think the one thing when you saw Crazy Nights was like, this is a band just going through the motions. If you look at Kiss in Philadelphia, I think it's 87, and Kiss Budokan 88, there's like nothing is happening, no energy. And then if you look at Detroit, or one of the great bootleg concerts out there like Middletown, it's like a new band. And I'm not sure what happened between 88 and 90, because the album Hot in the Shade in itself wasn't that great. It was like a mix of you know, old demos and that sort of stuff. But something happened. I never could understand what happened, but it was like a newborn band again, you know.
Yeah, they're definitely rejuvenated on that tour. And maybe Larry Messer is a contributor to that, you know, maybe he pumped them up saying, you guys got to go out there, and we've all seen The Second Coming with Doc McGee, but you got to go out there and kick some fucking ass type of deal. And to motivate them to go out there, they just look like a different band, and they look hungrier maybe than what they did in '87 on the Crazy Nights tour. They just the whole tour just has a different feel to it. If you look at some of those Crazy Nights shows and then look at the different Hot in the Shade shows that are out there, it's the same four members. It's not like they got a new drummer or a new guitar player on that tour. It's the same four guys, and it just looks totally different. I mean, look at the band, set list, the stage presentation.
Why do you think that was? I mean, it's hard to see that something substantial happened between 88 and 90, other than the album that was, you know, it wasn't a great success. Over here in Sweden, people didn't... I mean, it was the first album in like 10 years that didn't make the top 10. Crazy Nights was 11, Lick It Up, Asylum, and Animalize all were in the top 10, but Hot in the Shade came in at 29, and then it dropped like a rock. So even here, people didn't care for that album. But then the tour happened. Of course, they had a few great opening acts, like, or great, but decent at least. Winger and Danger, and what else? Slaughter. Faster Pussycat, and so on. But the show was like, to me, it was one of the first tours in a long time that was better than the previous tour. You know, like Animalize to me was better than Asylum, and Asylum to me was better than Crazy Nights. But now things started turning around, and Hot in the Shade became a better tour than Crazy Nights.
Yeah, that's an excellent point. You could see like the decline of the shows if you watch some of the shows in the '80s from tour to tour, and then Hot in the Shade comes around and it's just like bam. I mean, like I said, it just they just look rejuvenated and hungrier and you know, we'll get into the look of the band too. They just look better finally too. So and they only play 3 songs off of Hot in the Shade. Obviously, with the inclusion of all the classic songs, there's not room for a whole lot of new material, and that's something that they got away from too. That they were doing on Asylum and Crazy Nights, and previous tours that they were playing 6 or 5, 6 tunes off of the new record, and they scaled it back to only 3. They started the first like warm-up shows. They had played around with Betrayed and with Little Caesar, but they were both dropped right away. They only went with the 3 songs off the new album. So
talking about Fist Like a Glove, have you seen the clip when Gene Simmons simply can't remember the lyrics to Fist Like a Glove? I think it's on the Holiday Shade tour, Stony Pony or something, a club show. They started over, I think, 3 times or something, and he can't remember the lyrics. Kind of fun.
You don't have to.
Paul Stanley stepped in and does them.
You don't have to look real hard to find a show where Gene forgets the words of a song, though, either.
No, but it's so funny because it starts over like a few times, and it's like then it starts looking at Paul. Come on, Paul, sing me. Okay. And then Paul sings it.
That's funny.
Yeah.
So let's get into the stage show a little bit. That's major part of the tour, just visually. Obviously, Leon in the background, the Sphinx, and there's that. There's Leon singing, quote unquote singing, God of Thunder. The band coming out of the mouth of Leon to start the show. It was really Kiss going back to using the stage to their advantage, like they had in the heyday of the '70s, presenting a good stage show where they had really just had some really cheesy stages, in my opinion, with Crazy Nights and with Asylum. Just kind of mailed it in kind of stage shows. You're supposed to be Kiss. You're supposed to be the visually exciting band, and they finally got back to that. And not only with that, with the lasers, just everything that they did. It was, and I think Larry Mazar is a big reason for that. I think he really guided them into, you're a Kiss. You're supposed to be. You have a reputation of putting on the stage show. And I think the addition of him, you could really see the presence of him, what he did for the stage show, not only on Hot in the Shade, and then you see it again on the Revenge tour, too. They had a good stage presentation again with Larry at the helm calling the shots. So, Daniel, what do you think about? Give us some of your opinions and some takes on the stage.
Well, Larry Mazar, he changed a few things. You don't see Gene Simmons flicking out his tongue as he did in previous tours. And the one thing, I don't know if he had something to do with this, but there's one thing missing from the Hot in the Shade tour. Or are you thinking about the same thing as I am?
No fire breathing?
Yeah, no fire breathing. So that was like a downer, but it was like they didn't need it almost. They had those effects during God of Thunder, great lasers, a thought-through production, the intro when they're entered through the mouth. If you listen to the crowds, go to YouTube and listen to some the crowds are crazy when the introduction starts.
Yeah, there's no. It's really Kiss going into like a new style of a stage show, getting away from some of the old tricks, if you want to say, with the fire breathing. Obviously, there hadn't been blood drooling since the makeup came off, and it was a dramatic change that when the band came out, they didn't have the big Kiss logo in your face when you came out, and that's something that had been in place since the beginning. And that was a big deal at the time. That where's the Kiss logo? And I guess people that are obviously, I didn't see the show. The show came to St. Louis the day my older brother graduated from high school, and trying to convince my parents that I need to go to this Kiss show was not in the cards. But
so you missed out on 2 great Kiss shows.
Oh, I know. People are probably tired because I complain every week on the show about the Kiss shows that I've missed. But a buddy of mine that is a few years older than me, he was graduating from high school that night, and he skipped his high school graduation so he could go to the show. So that's dedication right there. That guy's a maniac. But so it was. I forget where I was going. I was getting on the stories. Having a great show. But it was was really Kiss getting the logo coming up at the end. It probably, for you, Ken, you were there. Seeing that logo like rise during "I Want You" was probably mind blowing at the time. It's like, oh, there it is, and just in your face. That's a Kiss show to me. So, Ken, what are your thoughts on the stage show and the Hot Shade tour?
Well, the stage show was probably one of the, obviously, probably top 5 for me stage shows. It was the best since I saw them on the Creatures of the Night tour. Then there was a big gap of kind of lackluster stages. I know Asylum had the huge Kiss logo, the gigantic lights, and I mean that was kind of cool, but that didn't make up for the lack of other things on the stage. Otherwise there's a bunch of grates and things they had on stages and so on. But this stage was awesome. I mean, as they came out, of course they came out at the beginning, and you're waiting for them to come out. You don't know where they're coming out, but they ended up coming out of the mouth of the Sphinx, which they call Leon, right? Named in honor, I guess, of as a joke, of the boxer Leon Sphinx. But that was very cool. Them coming out of there. I think there was like fog probably coming out of the mouth at that time. Then they appeared and came out. That whole thing, backdrop, it was just so cool looking, and it was functional, which is the other thing about it. It was functional. I mean, they had lots of lasers, just tons of lasers going off everywhere. They had lights in the eyes, right, and lasers. I believe sparks came out of the eyes at one point in the God of Thunder, I believe it was. And I don't know if they did anymore. I can't remember everything, but the stage was just fully functional, and then they just, along with their energy, they had like a renewed energy. You could see it because I saw them on Crazy of the Nights tour at the San Francisco Civic, and that was my worst of all the Kiss shows. That was the worst Kiss show I had ever seen. That was the low point for me of Kiss shows, and I've seen them. Well, I probably haven't seen them a lot. People have seen them hundreds of times, but I've seen them about 18 or so times right now. So that one was just horrible. I was disappointed. It was lacking emotion. You could see the emotion wasn't there.
No.
And
going through the motion.
Right, they were going through the motion. Like, what is wrong? Doesn't make sense to me. But so it was a 180 turn on the Hot in the Shade, where it was just full. They were energy running around like crazy. The set was great. The stage was great. I wasn't up close front. I wasn't up front on this one. Not that close. I was a little back, maybe 40 rows or something like that, But it was actually kind of good because I could see that whole stage in its full function. I was like, I was in the perfect spot. It was almost like I was meant to be in that seat. It's just the way it worked. So that show was really great. I mean, it was probably, like I said, top 5 for sure. Maybe my top 3 for me for stage shows for them. I left that concert fully satisfied. Like, wow, I thought they're back. They're back.
Yeah.
How was the attendance? How was the attendance at that Concord show that you saw?
It was pretty packed from what I remember. And then the other thing was you talked about is after "I Want You" and the Kiss logo, because we noticed, well, darn, this is the first concert I seen without a Kiss logo. I was asking my buddy, I was like, what? Gee, that's weird. That's strange. But I said, well, I guess they couldn't fit it because of the big Leon Sphinx. But that thing crumbles at the end of the show there and falls down, and then rising from the ashes like a phoenix, right? Here comes the Kiss logo, which is not the original Kiss logo, but it's a little smaller version of it. But it was still, it's like the crowd went crazy. Like, you're like, yeah, that's it. There it is. So
Yeah, that's really one of the coolest moments in the show. And you have the disco ball when they're starting off "I Want You," really reminiscent of Alive, and then the Kiss logo rising in the background. It's just really, it's one of the highlights of the show for me. It really is kind of like, if you're there, it'd be like, oh, this is what Kiss is all about right here. Alive at the disco ball and classic logo. I mean, I know it's not identical, but it's the classic logo from the 70s. It's a replica of the classic logo from the 70s. It's just, it's really, band just really going back to their roots on this tour. And maybe this is where, the wheel starts in motion, that the band sees that people still appreciate this classic era, and maybe a reunion. The reunion seeds are planted a little bit at that time. That even though Dino cringes when I say the reunion seeds are planted at the time.
I'm the only one. I'm the only one. But I just have to say a thing about Lee and the Swings. It should be called Michael. Michael was a much better boxer. I don't know if you know your boxing. Leon sucked big time. The only thing he did was beat over the hill Ali back in '78. So Michael the Swings would be better, but I guess they don't know their boxing.
So Daniel's pissed off about the name of the Swings 25 years later.
25 years later. He should be called Michael. You know that, all you boxing fans out there. But the other thing, I just have to go back to the set list a little bit. I think it was a great representation of, as you said, the classic Kiss, but also the Kiss without makeup. They had songs from Lick It Up, songs from Animalize, Under the Gun. They played that like 30, 40 times on that tour. Tears Are Falling, Crazy Night. So it felt like they were contemporary, but still incorporating the classic in a perfect mix. So I really like the set list on the Hits tour.
Yeah, the set list, I mean, obviously, you'll never see a set list like that one again. You'll never see Kiss play certain songs. I mean, you look at, it was the last time, Hot in the Shade tour was the last time they ever played Fits Like a Glove. They never played it again. And it's the last time they ever played Rise to It. And it was the last time they had played Crazy Crazy Nights up until 2010 when they resurrected that. And it was the last time you heard Hide Your Heart up until 2013. So it was really the end of some of an era of some songs. And like you said, it was a great mix though, because it encompassed the whole history of the band, with songs like Deuce and Strutter from the first album and Black Diamond all the way up to the new record. And they didn't ignore anything in between either. They didn't ignore, Crazy Nights or Asylum or Analyze or Lick It Up. They embraced all of their history of the band, and even embracing I Was Made for Loving You, which they hadn't played in the States since 1979.
And just compare how I Was Made for Loving You was performed during the Hot in the Shade tour to the Crazy Nights tour. It's like two different songs. It's like such a difference. During the Hot in the Shade tour, it was badass. It was heavy rock. And I kind of got turned on that song when watching, the Detroit concerts. Wow, I Was Made for Loving You rocks, I've only heard that, Dynasty version, and that wasn't one of my favorites.
I think they, the only thing they ignored was Hotter Than Hell. I didn't see that on the set list.
I think you're right.
Or at least it wasn't on the show I saw. I didn't see anything there was nothing from Hotter Than Hell on there. But they pretty much captured everything. Of course, they didn't do anything from like Unmasked or The Elder, of course.
Thank God. Yeah, like I said, it's really a set list that you'll never see again, and with encompassing the '80s in there also. I mean, having very heavy on the classic era, but encompassing the '80s in there as well. I mean, now when you see the band, you're lucky. I mean, obviously you're going to hear "Look It Up" every night, but and they might squeeze in, they might throw in a Hide Your Heart, or they might throw in a Crazy Crazy Nights like they did a few years ago. But it's really an era that they just ignore, basically. I mean, they ignore Hot in the Shade for the most part, Crazy Nights, Asylum, Animalized. It's 4 albums that, and even Revenge for the most part. I mean, they ignore for the most part too. They play God Gave Rock and Roll to You now and again, but you really haven't heard it in a while, actually. So, I mean, it's a set list that I don't think we'll ever see again. Obviously, the length of it, we're not going to see him play 22 songs straight through. I mean, you're talking 25 years ago.
Another great change from the Crazy Nights tour was that they left out the guitar solo, and did they have a bass solo on the Crazy Nights tour as well? I think so, didn't they?
I believe so, yeah.
Yeah. And though Kiss have, since Ace Frehley left the band, the guitar solos has never done anything for the show, to me at least. So that was a good, what do you say, omission? Yeah. You know, this is my second language. The last time I spoke English is like 1.5 months ago when I was with you guys, so kind of omission. That's a big.
No, that's a good point. That they left out the
big
guitar
word
solos.
like gymnasium, right?
Yeah.
No, that's a great point that they left out the guitar solos and that, and then when they started the tour, they didn't even have a drum solo either, and that really had Eric pissed off for a while. And Paul and Eric weren't even on speaking terms at the beginning of that tour, which really kind of confuses you if you look at the show and you see all the energy and you see the band. You must think, oh, these guys really love each other. They're really getting these 4 guys have been touring together. This is the 3rd tour that they've done, maybe I guess 4th tour that they've really done together. It was really kind of a stable lineup for the first time in a while. And watching that, you probably think, oh, wow, these guys are really getting along. They're gelling very nice-like. And you read and you find out that for the first couple months of the tour, Paul and Eric weren't even talking to each other. And like, really? Because you don't get that vibe on stage that they're that pissed off at one another.
Well, I don't think they were pissed off at each other. I think it was Eric Carr who was like, he thought he was a little bit more important to the band than he really was. Mm-hmm. And he couldn't accept the role that he had. He was an employee, much like Eric Singer, But he always thought he was a bit more, but he wasn't.
Well, I'm glad that they decided to put the drum solo in there, because that drum solo is one of the most awesome drum solos for me, with his, were they Sin drums or, the electronic drums, and creating a tune out of it that sounded like it was almost Egyptian-like, which kind of fell in line with the Sphinx, theme. Mm-hmm. So, that was just awesome for me. That was another awesome part of the show.
I think a great thing about this tour was that the theme worked, even though I never understood the album title or the cover.
Now, like, it's still
the worst cover. It's even worse than Julian's favorite album, Asylum. Yeah, it's even. Yeah, there you have it. I mean, what were they thinking? It's so bad. But during the tour, that looks better.
Yeah.
During the tour, it works perfectly. It was perfect for a tour. I don't know if they had that in mind when they did the album cover and the title and so on.
Doubt it.
I don't think so. Wasn't Paul Stanley's sister or something like an Egyptian? She had a lot of knowledge about Egypt and so on. Maybe she had something to do with it. Well, that's
could be.
But I think Larry Mazar deserves a lot of credit for pulling off that tour, because you look at that tour, the 2 tours that Larry was in charge of, that and the Revenge tour, both really had just a great stage presence to them, with the Statue of Liberty in the background, obviously for Revenge, and the Sphinx for Hot in the Shade, and he really and Larry too really, I think, was important in getting Kiss to look different than they had on previous tours. And you think about it, it's 1990. Hair metal thing has really fizzled down at that point, with Guns N' N' Roses being as big as they were at that point, and really kind of changing the landscape of how bands looked on stage. Motley Crue had really abandoned a glam look, and had, you look at what Motley Crue did in '89 on Dr. Feelgood tour, they look a lot different than they had on previous tours. Even a glam band like Poison even had really changed their look by the time Flesh and Blood came out in 1990, and they were still glammy, but they weren't as glammy. The glam thing had really died, and thank God it did, because it really worked to Kiss's advantage that they weren't going out there and trying to copy that look.
Yeah.
Kiss finally looked. I mean, I like the way they looked on the Revenge tour better, but I think they looked a whole lot better on that tour as opposed to Crazy Nights and Asylum, and they just don't look ridiculous.
I agree with you, but Gene Simmons kind of took a step towards, being the bad guy in bad character once again, and I liked the way he looked on stage. Paul Stanley, well, he was maybe the only one that kind of could pull off the 80s glam look. Where were we?
About Paul Stanley's look.
Paul Stanley pulled off.
Paul Stanley pulled off the looks during the 80s, and he looked even cooler back. Oh, now the feedback disappeared. Okay. Back in 1990, he looked kind of cool, and Gene Simmons as well. Bruce Kulick, well, I'm not sure how to say this, put this politely, but he always looks like kind of a studio musician on stage. But at least he plays awesome, and that's the main thing. Back to the drum solo. I guess that's one of the few drum solos during Kiss's career that I've actually enjoyed. They put a lot of effort into making it special and a big thing of the show. If you look back, like on Crazy Nights and Animals, well, he plays well and so on, but they haven't put a lot of effects and bombs into Eric Carr's solos. But this time around, they really pulled it off, and it was like an extra spice to the concert. So I'm also, as Ken said, I was also glad that they incorporated the Eric Carr solo and omitted the Bruce Kulick solo.
Yeah, I mean, and then in hindsight, obviously, it's Eric's last tour with the band, and the fact that we got a really cool drum solo from Eric, especially being his last tour and being as special as it was with the lasers and the electronic drums behind him, and it really leaves just a great impression in your mind of how great Eric Carr was as a drummer. And I think that when they implemented the drum solo back into the show, it made Eric feel a lot better and more wanted and more needed. Yeah, I mean, Eric, you read reports from 1990 that Gene and Paul were trying to downplay Eric's importance to the band, like you had mentioned earlier, Daniel. That Eric was kind of feeling at the time that, well, I've been around for 10 years now. I think he's trying to stake his claim more into it, and and not to sound like a jerk or anything, but Eric was an employee of the band, and as much as he was important, but he was still an employee, as was Bruce. And I think Bruce towed that line very well. And Bruce knew from day one, this, I'm here, I'm going to do my part and do what I'm told, because obviously from the string of guitar players they had before me, bam, 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 I can be replaced in a heartbeat. So I'm going to take advantage of this opportunity and just do my part. So, but back to the drum solo, it's a great drum solo, and like I said, Eric's last tour with the band, November 9th, 1990, at Madison Square Garden. The last night of the tour is Eric's last performance with the band. Last live performance with the band. Obviously, he played on God Gave Rock. He didn't play on God Gave Rock and Roll to You, but he was in the video of God Gave Rock and Roll to You. So, I never got to see Eric Carr live. I think, Ken, you're the only one here. Daniel, did you ever see Eric Carr? No? So, Ken, you're the seasoned veteran. You're the seasoned veteran here.
Yeah. Yeah, I saw them several times, and yeah, like we said before, I'm glad that they got that drum solo on the Hot in the Shade tour. I recommend anyone who hasn't seen it or does not have Kissology to pick up one of the Kiss. Is it Volume 2?
Yeah.
Has the drum solo in the Hot in the Shade tour. I think it's in Detroit, right?
Yeah.
And that's kind of, it's a great video. You probably find it on YouTube too, also.
Yes.
Yeah.
October in Detroit. They played in May as well, and then it was not included, the solo.
Yeah. The May show, you can find that on YouTube. That's a really good show also. And that's a show that they did, that they didn't do I Was Made for Loving You, and they did Under the Gun, so you can kind of,
Yeah.
you know, if you want to go back and revisit, you know, a different show from Hot in the Shade tour, you can see the difference. But I Was Made for Loving You just sounded really cool in that show, and that again is Larry Mazar. He is the one that really forced them into playing that song, and they didn't want to do it. They didn't want to do it. Said no, it's not gonna. It's not. You know, that was. We're trying to distance ourselves from that. I mean, granted, we'll go back and play some of these songs from the '70s, but you know, we really don't want to touch on that period of the band. He insisted that they do it, and the reaction from the crowd every night when they went in I Was Made for Loving You was ecstatic. People
you said crowds. We haven't really talked about the crowds during this tour.
Mm-hmm.
It was the first tour in quite some time that was a huge success, I guess we have to say, at least. Some people mean that it has to do with the opening acts, that they pull in a lot of audience, but I'm not that sure that the opening acts pulled in a lot of audience. I think the show itself was... I'm not sure they even needed those opening acts, because the show was great. And I guess in Detroit they played for like 12,000 people both nights, something like that. And those numbers are really impressive. So if you go back a few years, they didn't do those kind of numbers. Of course, they always did well in Detroit, but overall it was a lot more people at the shows than during the previous tours.
Yeah, Slaughter was really big at the time, though, when they took them out, and they were the main opening act before Kiss. They were very MTV heavy at the time. They were really big in the rotation, but back to your point though too, that I think the Kiss did it for themselves, is that they were playing smaller venues also. I mean, 123 shows. You're playing. I was looking it up. I was looking at some stuff yesterday, and they played in Missouri alone, where I live. They played 5 shows in Missouri. They played St. Louis. They played a small.
See a single one.
Thank you for reminding me. But it was before the internet too. I mean, I don't know that they're going to play Cape Girardeau, Missouri, which is 2 hours south of me, which is a small college town. And they played Columbia, Missouri. They played Springfield, Missouri. They played Kansas City, Missouri. 5 shows in Missouri, in just the middle America alone. It's really back to a grassroots campaign for the band. And they're playing like these small basketball arenas in these small college towns. And it's, I mean, and I'm sure you go look at other states too. They're playing small basketball arenas at these little college towns also. Like I know in Illinois, they played like Peoria, Illinois, Springfield, Illinois. Obviously, they did a show in Chicago. And they played like Carbondale, Illinois. Just really small venues, and just going back to their roots of going to the people instead of having the people come to them. And that's another aspect that we'll never, ever see again on a Kiss tour, especially with Live Nation being the juggernaut that it is in the United States. I mean, 2011, yeah, they did play some they played like a quote-unquote Lost Cities tour in 11 and played some smaller venues. Like I saw them in Springfield, Illinois in 2011, and at a small piece of crap arena. But it's not something you're going to see again, especially at their age. They're not going to play 123 shows in the United States.
But were they able to fit the swings in all of those places?
I don't know. I don't have, you know, that's a good question actually. That maybe you should ask the guys from Kiss Alive Forever. Ask Kurt Gooch from Kiss Alive Forever. He probably would know. But that's a good question. Those smaller arenas, was the whole stage show encompassed in their shows? Because obviously we don't have a lot of proof because it's not like a show is today where it shows up on YouTube 12 hours after the show happens. You can see the set list, you can see all the effects.
Talking about the attendance, I know I was looking at it in Concord. It was almost 9,000 people showed up for that. That's a pretty good amount there. And I think that was maybe before they remodeled it to add more seating there. And I remember they remodeled it, but I can't remember if it was after that or not. But I think it was after that they did some remodeling. But yeah, that's a pretty good crowd.
Mm-hmm.
What were we talking?
Interviews,
yeah. There's a lack of great interviews from the On the Shade tour. If you compare to Crazy Nights, where there are several interviews, there aren't a lot of interviews during the On the Shade tour. The one that comes to mind is the French one, when they fool around playing acoustic songs. Kind of fun. But other than that, I haven't seen a lot of interviews. Have you guys seen any interviews that's worthy of looking up?
no.
I don't remember a lot. No.
You have the backstage thing. They were planning to do some sort of exposed 2 or something, and they filmed a lot with, backstage, and those films have leaked out to YouTube, so you can actually see a few of them. You can see Gene Simmons, doing his thing, making his roadies bring him girls. Not very romantic, but you get the hang of it, how it works. The roadies bring girls, they go to some room, and 5 minutes later the girl leaves. Have you seen, quite lengthy videos, like 40 minutes an hour? I think there are 3 parts on YouTube.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of interesting, but other than that and the French interview there, I haven't seen a lot of off-stage material.
No, and for one, I'm glad that they didn't do an Exposed 2, because it's cheesy as Exposed is, and Hot in the Shade tour, they're really getting back to being a different type of band than what they were when Exposed came out. And to do another cheesy video to come out after that, I think would have could have been a step backwards for them at that point.
Well, I'm not sure they would have done it in the same vein, I would have loved them to include some backstage material, and also the rehearsals that they filmed as well, and then have some stuff from the Detroit shows and so on. And you could have had a nice package, a great video. But the Exposed thing, it was so 80s. They wouldn't get away with a second version of that. I think they just wanted to. It was like how do you say it? Like a name under progress, a working name.
Work in progress.
Work in progress.
Yeah. They would have probably named it something else. What's Extreme Close-Up? If you look at the first posters for Extreme Close-Up, I think it was called, Exposed 2, wasn't it? They were in. I think it was. So I think they thought that Exposed was a great brand that they would use once more, but they didn't do it. But a video from that tour, I think I would love a video from that tour. I think it's I'm missing it. But then you would have to step away from the Exposed thing and do it like, Kiss on tour, backstage, live performances, and a little bit of interviews with the bands, because the interviews are really missing from 1990, to me at least. I haven't been able to find any.
Yeah, I think it would have been cool if they would have done something like in the vein of how they did Kiss Confidential, with a live show and then back and interviewing the band in between some songs and that. I'm glad that we have the version of that Detroit show on Kissology 2, but for a long time it wasn't an avenue for you to go get a good clean version of a Hot in the Shade show. And seeing that on Kissology, obviously not seeing the tour, but seeing that on Kissology was just a great experience watching that, and especially for the first time and seeing that Kiss logo rise up. And it's just a great tour that and just really saw the band get back to their roots again, and just do it the right way, and really kind of live up to the Kiss thing and saying this is how the big boys do it. Well, that was how the big boys did it on the Hot in the Shade tour. There's no doubt about it. It's the energy level, the set list, the stage show, the look of the band. They really hit it on the head, especially for that time in 1990. Kiss did everything they could to look and present the best show that they possibly could have at that given moment.
Yeah, it took them about 7 years to do it, but they finally turned the corner and were headed in the right direction with that, and then the Revenge tour following it. So
it was such a letdown when the reunion era started, and they kind of ignored. Sorry, going back to this subject, but they ignored. You remember the first years, like 96, 7, 8? They totally ignored the non-makeup years. Totally. It was like it never happened. And to me and other people that grew up with the 80s Kiss, I think it was terrible for us. And
all right, so Daniel was talking about those songs that Kiss started ignoring in the 80s and when the reunion tour happened, actually. So, yeah, I was excited when they brought back Lick It Up, and actually I was excited when they brought back Lick It Up and I Love It Loud and Heaven's on Fire when they did the farewell tour, because they were songs that they hadn't played since 96. And there's really, and 3 of those songs are songs that I really grew up with in the 80s, being a fan of the band. That was exciting for me. And, just going back and driving home the point that there are songs that they played on that Hot in the Shade tour that we never heard again, and we'll never see a set list like we saw on the Hot in the Shade tour ever again. And it's a great timestamp of the band at that time. While the band was touring, though, they had some cool promotional items that came out. The band released a record called First Kiss, Last Licks that had some of the Deuce and Strutter. What demos are on there? Ken, since you got it right.
We had Deuce and Strutter were on there as the demos.
73 Eddie Kramer demos, first official release of those. And then what Hot in the Shade songs are on there?
Hot in the Shades, we got Love's the Slap in the Face.
Nice.
Betrayed. Prisoner of Love. The Street Giveth and the Street Taketh Away.
Some classic on there.
That's it. Yeah.
Nice.
And they had the Nowhere to Run and Partners in Crime that were part of Killers. Back in the
first time those are probably officially released in America also.
Yeah, and they had some interesting on the back of it about handwritten notes about some of the songs, about how they came to be.
Yeah, and the handwritten notes, that's also reminiscent of Alive, going back to one of their trademark deals. So obviously you can see we've lost Daniel. Daniel had an alarm or an emergency, or maybe he's being courted off to prison at this point. We're really not sure. But so you're left with me and Ken. So I am slowly but surely taking over the show. I've gotten rid of Julian. We have gotten rid of Daniel.
I'm next to be carted off. If you
don't like me, well, you're in trouble. You're probably just going to stop listening at this point. So, some cool. Kiss got back to doing some different things too, with promotional items for the tour. We talked about First Kiss, Last Licks. Daniel's out of jail and he has just returned the dead.
You won't fucking believe what just
happened in prison. I don't want to know, but he's back. Daniel, let's go back to what you were saying. You probably don't remember what you were saying because it's been a while, but you were talking about how it's great. You were talking about how Hot in the Shade, how they when they did the reunion tour, Daniel isn't a big fan of the reunion tour, how they abandoned the songs Lick It Up. They abandoned a lot of the 80s material, was just gone up until the farewell tour when they brought back Lick It Up and I Love It Loud and Heaven's on Fire. That they were talking about the set list, how it was really just a set list that you're never going to see again. And it's just and how it when they did the reunion, they basically ignored the '80s. So. We're gonna talk about some promotional items that came out on this tour. Ken showed up. Ken put up his copy of First Kiss, Last Licks.
I have one as well.
With the first time Deuce and Strutter, those Eddie Kramer demos had been available in the States, and they also Kiss got back to doing some kind of cool trinkets. Also, there was a Hot in the Shade hat. They had the oversized tour book. Which is a great tour book. If you don't have it, it's one of my favorites. There it is. It's really cool book, and there was a paperweight that was available, and some cheap Hot in the Shade sunglasses. So maybe you could dress up like the Sphinx for Halloween or something with your sunglasses on. But I think that we talk about the changes in the band from Crazy Nights to Hot in the Shade, and that's what makes this tour so special. And going back to Larry Mazar, I think he is the biggest reason for the change in the band and getting them to run around on stage and be more of a Kiss on stage and not just going through the motions like they were on some of the previous tours, especially Crazy Nights. So, do you guys have any more thoughts on the tour itself? Daniel, you made a 2-kilometer run. Show some dedication. It's more things for you.
I'm all out of breath, One thing you've mentioned Larry Mazar a lot, and but do you think there was any way around Kiss failing on the next tour, on the Revenge tour? Because to me it was a great tour, great set list, a great show, but music was changing. Could they have done it some other way? Because the Hot in the Shade was such a great success, and then what the fuck is the sound of? I just think I will quit right here. But I just would like to hear Lonnie's thoughts on the Revenge tour. Could they have done it in any other way in order to make the success?
Okay, so if you couldn't hear. Daniel just quit the show again. If you couldn't hear what Daniel was saying that we've been crediting Larry Mazar for the success of the Hot in the Shade tour, and you look at the Revenge tour, that it did not spawn the same success as Hot in the Shade, despite having a great set list, despite having a cool stage show. Why couldn't Kiss continue down the road of success that they were having with Hot in the Shade with Revenge? And I think a large part of it is the fact that music was changing music had changed at the time. I think in Hot in the Shade, music was in a transition, getting away from hair metal and glam. And by the time Revenge came, I think grunge had come into effect. I mean, by '92, Pearl Jam was pretty heavy, pretty popular. Nirvana was pretty popular. Soundgarden, all those Stone Temple Pilots out by '92 or not. I'm not sure if Carr had come out yet by that point or not. But anyway, bands like that had really taken over what was popular on MTV, what was popular on the radio. A lot of alternative, quote-unquote alternative rock stations had become popular at the time too. And I think that by that point by the fall in '92, Kiss was seen as a dinosaur band again. And they did not have the radio hit that they had with Forever. I think Every Time I Look at You could have been a great radio single, could have been a great hit. I think it's a better song, but I think with where music was at the time in '92, there was a drastic change. Ken, what are your thoughts on that, about how despite having a great stage show again and despite having a great set list, why Kiss wasn't able to sustain some touring success 2 years later?
Yeah, I agree with you about the music styles have changed with grunge, and the hair metal thing is dying off. The only people that were staying around were the true Kiss fans at that point, I think. It's just very interesting because you go from 1973 or 74 to 82 or 83. They hit their peak, and then it trailed off into Creature of the Night and Nothing. That's kind of the first wave right there. They hit it, then they became dinosaurs at that point. They take off the makeup, and then they go lick it up and animalize it. Then they're increasing in popularity again, all the way up to 1990 with Hot in the Shade, and then it hit its peak again, and then it's trailing off again down from to Revenge, and they can't sell tickets. And it's the same thing. So it's like the second wave. They became a dinosaur band a second time, right? And then here we go. So now they go into the reunion tour, and very, very popular. Firstly, well, they do the Unplugged, which the popularity starts coming back up a little bit. The interest is starting to come back. The convention tours, maybe. And then they do the reunion, and they go to all the way up to the Farewell. So they peak again. They hit Psycho Circus. They kind of hit the peak. Maybe that's where it's starting to fall. And into the Farewell. So it's kind of like they've hit these. It's like cyclical, it's these cycles, and they become a dinosaur band. And it's even happening up to now, I think, up to when they hit 2009 was a big deal. They did very well in 2009. Resurgence 9 through it. It's like one wave, another wave of time, another wave. It's I don't know. You can't explain it.
No, it's just people's tastes change, and the hardcore fans stick with them, and I think other fans come and go through time, and I think you gain fans along the way, and you lose fans along the way, depending on what where life has you at the time. But it's a good point, and it'd be interesting to see what happens from here. You said 2009 they really had a resurgence, kind of like they had with Reunion, and by Hot in the Shade they were kind of we've discussed the amount of shows on Hot in the Shade and attendance on Hot in the Shade. And who knows where they're going to go from here? If another album's going to pique interest again, or if a DVD set, or who knows what they have up their sleeve, could re-peak interest again. But I think that I think that the music changed from 90 to 92, and that's why they weren't able to sustain what they had going. And there's people weren't into that anymore, and people were really into what was happening with bands like Pearl Jam and Nirvana. And look at Motley Crue went through with Vince being gone, and despite putting out one of their better albums, it didn't have anything. Daniel is determined to get back on the show. And just leave Daniel's video up while this is going on. And I think that Hot in Shade was just a great tour and a great time to be a Kiss fan. It's something I wish I could have seen. I'm very jealous of Ken every week when we talk about the shows that Ken has seen with Hot in the Shade, that he saw Creatures, and all those shows in the 80s in between too. I mean, it's my fandom as a kid growing up, and Ken got to experience all those shows, so it's a great time to be a fan.
I'll tell you all about them.
No, we need to do it. We need to do like an Asylum tour. As horrible as that may be, we need to have like an Asylum tour. Talk about that and talk about other shows. That's Julian's episode. We're saving that one for when the 30th anniversary of Hot in the Shade. Well, not Hot in the Shade. Talking Hot in the Shade. When the 30th anniversary of Asylum comes around, that's going to be Julian's show. That's Julian's album. So. We will get Julian back on. Julian will come back on the show. I have not taken over the show. Daniel, are you there? Can you hear us? Can we hear you? We cannot hear Daniel. Poor Daniel. I feel sorry for him. Well, since it's just me and Ken, and we're kind of off the rail this week, we're going to wrap this up so that Julian doesn't have to do too much editing and Julian doesn't fire me. So, for Julian, and for Ken, for Daniel all the way in Sweden, Thank you for running 2 kilometers, Daniel, and trying to rejoin the show. We appreciate all your dedication, and thank you all for listening to the KissFAQ podcast.
It was my fault, Julian.
A little message to Julian on the show. Thank you all for listening, and you stay classy, Kiss Army.
Thank you for spending time listening to the KissFAQ podcast today. All sales are final. There are no refunds. If you like, look us up on Facebook or come over to the KissFAQ message board and discuss the topic we broadcast today. We hope to see you again.